Hi, my name is Kurt Borgmann, and I'm one of the pastors at the Manchester Church of the Brethren, and a friend to many of you. The title for my presentation today is Lessons from the Backyard. And what I want to talk about has to do with what I've learned from the ducks that live in my backyard. Right before the pandemic lockdown in March of 2020, my son and his girlfriend came to the house one day with two little ducklings, newly hatched, cute and soft, like all baby animals are. I didn't want two ducks, but as you may know, all it takes is a child who is yearning for a pet, as my daughter was. And next thing you know, you've got animals in the backyard. The ducklings were advertised as Roans, an English breed that looks a lot like what you might think of when you think of wild mallards. Similar coloring, the females, of which it turned out we had two, are brown with a stripe of blue in their wings, while the males are more gray-silver through the body with a green head. But these domesticated ducks, while they look similar to mallards, are larger than their wild duck cousins. Our ducks grew rapidly during those early weeks and months of lockdown. They were fun to watch. Lots of people got pets during that time. I kept seeing posts on Facebook of people getting new puppies. We had ducks. As the summer went on, they matured and really started to show their personalities. And that kind of surprised me. I hadn't thought of creatures like ducks having personalities, but they did. One was more assertive and the other more shy. One a little more curious, the other more content to stay in familiar places, and so on. We also learned about duck care and duck needs as we went along. What ducks need, what they will do, what they won't do, how they interact with each other and with humans. Anyway, I want to tell you 7 things that I've learned from our ducks. Lessons from the backyard, if you will. Lesson number 1, real life is lived in the backyard, not on the internet. The internet experts will tell you that Roans, the breed of our ducks, don't fly, that they can't fly. But apparently nobody told our ducks that. And interestingly, when they first flew, it wasn't fear that sent them flying, which is also what you will read on the internet, trying to escape some threat. But it was their curiosity that made them take flight. One day they saw us on the other side of the yard. I think we were making a campfire in the fire circle, and they wanted to know what was going on. So they flew out of their pen and just kept flying until they landed at our feet. I'm not sure who was more surprised, them or us. My daughter worried then. Maybe they will fly away now, she said. No, I told her, I don't think so. Did you see where they flew this time? They didn't fly away. They flew to us. Contrary to what the internet might say, domestic ducks can fly, but that doesn't mean they will fly away. They can just as easily fly to. So lesson number 1, real life is lived in the backyard, not on the internet. Lesson number 2, sometimes bad things happen, and there isn't always someone to blame. Late last fall, when my son's dog got loose one chilly November evening at dusk, and before we could catch either the dog or the ducks in the yard, the dog caught and killed one of the ducks. My daughter was heartbroken. My son was terribly upset too. He blamed himself, but he also instinctively leaned into the pain. He did the right thing. He put his arms around his sister and he said, "I am so sorry." Later on, she reflected, I wish there was someone to blame, but there isn't. It wasn't my brother's fault. The dog escaped his grasp. The dog was determined to get away and picked the right moment to make his break. It wasn't the dog's fault. He was just following his instinct. It wasn't the duck's fault. She just froze with fear. I said to my daughter, "You're right. Sometimes when we are sad, we want someone to blame. But sometimes all we can do is be sad." Lesson number 2, sometimes bad things happen and there isn't always someone to blame. Lesson number 3, caring for others is work, but it is also worthwhile. Caring for the ducks is work. I clean out their duck house twice a week. I change the water in their big tub, the one they swim in, about as often. I fill water bowls and food bowls. I hose down the ramp to the tub. Every morning, someone has to let them out of their duck house. And every evening, someone has to put them to bed in their house. And most often, that is me. It really is more work than you might imagine. One of those ducks has been laying 1 egg a day, every day, for months and months. The other duck has just started to lay. She lays 2 days in a row, then she takes a day off, then lays an egg the next couple of days. 1 or 2 eggs a day hardly seems enough to balance the scales. And yet, in addition to laying eggs, there are also times when those crazy ducks make me laugh. And that makes it even more worthwhile. Like when the first really cold morning came last fall and they scrambled up onto the deck to peer in through the door from the deck to the kitchen, as if there was some possibility that they could come in out of the weather. Or when they sneak around the side of the house, because apparently there are better bugs there than at the back of the house. Or when I fill the water bowl and I turn my back just for a second, and already one of them has climbed in and splashed half of the water out, or they filled their bills with mud and muddied the water in no time flat. Or when one of them comes running over when I walk into the yard and pecks at my feet and then runs away again, as if to say, I see you, do you see me? Those things make me smile, and sometimes they make me laugh. Lesson number 3, caring for others is work, but it is also worthwhile. Lesson number 4, friendships take time to develop. When the one original duck was killed, we knew we had to get another duck to keep the surviving one company. One duck alone is not good for the happiness and well-being of that single duck. Ducks need a flock, or at least a friend. So Pat Price got us a duck from an Amish farm. He brought it to me in a burlap bag. He shook it out of the bag. Here's your duck. It was a farm duck, not a pet duck. And it was a different breed from our first ducks. It was strange looking, almost kind of creepy looking, with a red ring of color around its eyes. And it was afraid of humans. While our little brown rowan duck would scoot around our feet, this big white Muscovy duck would run away when it saw us coming. The first evening we had it, it was quite a production to try to catch it and put it in the duck pen, since we were hoping it wouldn't just run away. But like our brown ducks, this one could fly too, so no sooner did we get it in the pen than it took to flight, and almost flew across the road at the back of our yard. And this was the disappointing part, it didn't seem much interested in being a companion to the duck we already had. It seemed like a failed experiment, and then one day, after about a week had passed, I looked out the window and the 2 ducks were walking around the yard together, searching for bugs, side by side. And more time passed, and soon, wherever one was, the other was likely to be as well. One duck quacks, the other one coos. Apparently, different breeds make different sounds. But they seem to talk to each other. They are an odd couple, one smaller and brown, the other bigger and mostly white. But they've become friends. I smile when I see one wandering out into the yard and the other calling it to come back. Lesson number 4, friendships take time to develop. Lesson number 5, even though everything flying overhead isn't dangerous, it doesn't hurt to keep an eye on the sky. From the very beginning, the ducks kept an eye on the sky. When something was overhead, they would cock their heads to the side in unison and aim one eye to the sky. When they did that, I would look up too. Sometimes it was something way, way up in the sky, gliding around on the air currents. It could even be an airplane. Occasionally, it was a hawk. When it was a hawk, they would run for cover. Instinctively, they seem to know that danger comes from above. But even instinct is not perfect. It's not always rational. They watch for airplanes, but they don't run for cover when a jet flies overhead. But the other day, I saw them watching the sky and then scrambling for cover. It was a heron flying low overhead. No danger to them, but certainly a big bird. I laughed at them, but then I thought too that they are probably smart to take no chances. Lesson number 5, even though everything flying overhead isn't dangerous, it doesn't hurt to keep an eye on the sky. Lesson number 6, everyone is capable of learning, but most of us have to figure it out for ourselves, in our own way and in our own time. When the new duck, the white Muscovy, first came to us, we couldn't get anywhere near it, much less catch it. So at night, while we would catch the original little brown duck, put it in the wooden duck house that my father-in-law made for us, and close and lock the hinge door to keep it safe overnight, we took a different approach to the skittish white duck. That new duck we would just herd toward the old shed and the enclosed area with the chicken wire fence. We found that if we chased it a bit, it would fly up and over the fence and into the pen for the night. Not as safe as being closed in the duck house, but what could we do? During the day, the two ducks would hang around the back of our house, near the big water tub, the food, and the duck house. But every night, we'd go through the same routine. We'd catch the brown duck and put it in the duck house and herd the white one over to the pen. Then, one evening, the brown duck decided to go into the duck house herself. We didn't have to catch her anymore, just kind of guide her in and shut the door behind her. Once she was safely inside, we would still herd the white duck across the yard toward the pen. This went on for a while. And then one evening, I went outside and said to the ducks, as had become my custom, "Time for bed, guys." And don't you know, the brown duck walked right into the duck house on her own, and the white one followed right behind. And from then on, they would take turns each evening. Sometimes the white one would lead the way, and sometimes the brown one. And then once in a while, we'd look out during the day, and if the air was especially cold or windy, we could look inside the house and see them both bedded down side by side, happy at home. Lesson number 6, everyone is capable of learning, but most of us have to figure it out for ourselves in our own way and in our own time. And finally, lesson number 7 from the backyard. The future is always unknown. One morning a couple of weeks ago, we looked out a back window of the house, and the ducks were nowhere to be seen. They weren't in the backyard or the neighbor's backyard. My daughter and I went outside to check. The ducks, it turns out, were in the front yard. And not only that, but they were exploring the puddles along the edge of the road. And not only that, but one of them started across the road and made it about halfway before it heard me calling and turned back. And you know what's across the road? A large empty lot, and beyond that, Bev and Joel Aikenberry's side yard and their backyard, and beyond that, at the edge of their backyard, a big pond. I looked at the ducks and I said to my daughter, if they ever make it all the way across the road, and then across the yard, and then they find the pond, they may never come back. We shooed them back into the backyard before they could go any further that day. But what I said may be true, or it may not be true. They could find the pond someday, and then they might not come back, or they might. The call of home is a strong call, after all, but is it stronger than the urge for freedom? We don't know. Lesson number 7, the future is always unknown. And finally, one more thing. I mentioned that between the two ducks, they lay an egg or two every day. After we open the door to the duck house in the morning, The little brown duck will often march out to the shed by herself, find a private spot in the corner, and lay her egg. The white duck tends to go behind a sheet of plywood that sits up against the deck to form a nest and lay her egg. Sometimes they lay the eggs in the duck house itself, where it is sheltered and safe. But each time those eggs are perfect, beautiful. If you want one sometime, I'll bring you one. Just let me know. I'm beginning to think that happy ducks lay happy eggs. Maybe that's a lesson from the backyard, too.